Hi there, and thanks for tuning in for another exciting vlog, podcast, blog, etc. I'm very, very lucky today to be joined by two creative artists, video makers, trainers, um, and people that are really learning how to bring boring stuff like mandatory training in resilience, in cyber, in controls, in compliance to life. So they're much more memorable, much more impactful, and actually they make a real difference to the control posture of the organizations that take them on board. So first of all, I have Ian Murphy from CyberOff. If those of you who've been following Ian on LinkedIn, and I'm sure TikTok and all the other social media platforms that Ian is on, you'll have seen some of his very, very funny but really, really meaningful videos on cybersecurity, and also Simeon Quarry, who I've worked with in the past, and we've done a lot of great work in bringing to life some of the complex and quite dry topics of resilience to a broader audience and making it mandatory, but hopefully making it enjoyable at the same time. So thanks guys for joining me. I really appreciate it. Maybe I'll just go to you first, Ian. Ian, is there anything else you wanted to add from my intro, but also, you know, what does it mean to you to bring sort of cyber training to the masses?
I think firstly, being called a creative artist, I've been called an artist before, but with something else before it, never creative. But I think for me to bring any kind of, I've never really got the term awareness, because awareness means a hell of a lot, but really doesn't explain anything. I like to refer to the types of things that I think I'm trying to do is to help increase people's cyber savviness. So more around savvy, more around what you need to stay safe in the online world. So the type of stuff that, you know, if I'm growing up on the streets of Liverpool, I know I can't go to that neighborhood because there's a great degree of possibility I'll get beaten up if I go there. So it's trying to bring that type of spidey sense to people without making them security experts, because I dislike the term human firewall. I don't think anyone comes to work to become an extension of their security controls that they spend a lot of money on. I think they come to work to have a pay packet, to have a life outside of work. And I think it's slightly myopic of a business to think that they're there to protect the business. And I think if we turn that on its head and we make people cyber savvy by giving them interesting content that they can share with families and friends, then I think a lovely byproduct of that is you get people protecting your business without you even to ever ask once.
Yeah, I think it's a great point. You know, it's that culture, and how do you get that culture kind of weaved in, so it's not just yet another part of their job they're going to have to remember to do in the checklist at the end of every day. It's just they just know it. It's muscle memory. Simeon, what about yourself?
Um, yeah, for me, I guess very similar to Ian. I think for my focus and the way I look at it is trying to make a subject matter. If a subject doesn't matter to an individual, then there is going to be no positive behavior related to it in the first place. And I think we've all been in these situations where, you know, we hear terms, we hear phrases, and they're rammed down our throat. And because you don't get it, at that fundamental level, even if you're not aware, sometimes you're not aware, Ian, actually, you know, sometimes it's just actually you're not aware of that concept full stop. So I think first step, we end up trying to make people aware, but our focus is to make it matter. And then once you make it matter, that's when you can then start to make things stick.
So I do refer to both you as creatives, artists, because actually having, you know, there's a lot of thought and planning that's clearly gone into your videos, Ian, um, and obviously with your Simeon as well. And how do you get your inspiration for your ideas, and 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 how do you kind of measure success in their delivery? So maybe Ian, what about you?
Inspiration kind of just comes from everyday life, right? When I get a family member, because I'm the security guy to them, so their default is any IT problem, whatever it is, let's go to Ian and let's ask him, you know, is this a scam? Is this an issue? So I think a lot of the inspiration comes from that. And let me tell you, there's a lot of stuff when you have to repair your father's laptop that you can never get out of your mind, especially their search history. Don't ever go down that route, right? I think the other thing is my upbringing and my background. I think when people talk to each other about stuff, it's a different language than a corporate language. And I think people are so afraid in a corporate setting to upset somebody. I think if you don't set out with the intention to upset somebody, if it happens accidentally and you apologize for it, but I think the problem is that when we try and explain complex matters to people, we're using a language that is alien to them to get it over. And I think the inspiration for the videos I do is to try and use simple language. You know, being a Liverpool fan, I'm a favourite of. I love what Bill Shankly has to say on using difficult words to explain something. When he describes somebody who'd used the word avarice, he said, "I just call them bloody greedy." You know, and that's essentially that's the essence of it. The essence is help people understand the stuff by making it simple and enjoyable for it. You know, and that's where that inspiration comes from, especially when you then tie in Tommy Cooper and Morecambe and Wise and Billy Connolly and those great comedians of the past. You know, that's what I try and bring to it. Very on a very small scale, by the way.
Funny, I was watching one of your videos the other day, and it reminded me. I grew up the generation of things like Eddie Murphy, Delirious, and Raw, and Billy Connolly live at the Hammersmith Odeon, which was a bit late, or much later, and then Robin Williams live at the Met, and that sort of comedy was. I kind of like see it. You know, even you could sort of say Derek and Clive from one angle as well, the Monty Python, but that's sort of observational irony comedy, right?
Yeah.
And playing the stereotype and playing the sarcasm and playing the irony. It's what makes it. I think it also makes it resonate for Brits in particular, because we're very good at we're very self-deprecating. We're very good at kind of like taking the mickey out of ourselves when it comes to our inability to do certain things as well. So I think it's really coming through. And Simeon, what about you?
Yeah, I mean, I think that I tend to lean in the direction very much of story. I very much agree with Ian. You know, look, the aim is to take things that start off by very complicated and distill them down into a really simple form. And typically, storytelling has been used to do that. Because if something's very complicated, you can't relay it from one person to another. And the storytelling was often used in order to be able to wrap things in a way so that when it went from one person to another, or from one generation to another, the key sentiment and the key essence was there. So stories can often use humor. Often different cultures will use different levers in those stories, in order to be able to make those stories more effective. But very complex language is very, very rarely ever the tool that's used. But we seem to find that, when it comes to business, that tends to be the approach that's often used. I think, so for a start, Mike, that I don't come from a corporate background, right? In fact, some of the projects that we did were part of my, the beginning of our foray into more corporate and commercial work. And I remember sitting up in the office of the bank on the 33rd floor, 31st floor, and there was this term's been thrown at me. It was business continuity and a move from that to resilience, and I was just like, whoa, slow down a minute, break this concept down for me, so I can then start to understand it. And I very much enjoy, even now, naturally. My understanding and the team's understanding of these subjects has obviously hugely advanced, and in many cases, naturally, of course, becoming, Ian loved this, subject matter expert, inverted commas. But it's really important still to keep going, no, but what do you mean? What do you mean? Do you mean it's like this? And in fact, so I often utilize it's like, and often use, maybe I've been brought up with illustrations often, maybe because partly I come from I was growing up, I was brought up as a religious background where things were often illustrated. And as a result, those illustrations make things very, very simple for people to understand.
Yeah. That's quite interesting. Yeah. I mean, I often, you and I've talked about this before. I've got like a Lego brain. I don't do well with lots of words. And I'm probably, I don't think I am dyslexic, but I just don't like reading lots of words.
Yeah.
But, when I see a picture or a video or something like that, it's great. And the ideas come across much more quickly, and they resonate with me. I was on a call earlier today with an architect, and he was telling me all this stuff about cloud, and I was like, whoa.
Yeah.
Do you have a picture you could show me? And he's like, yes, I do. I said, put it on the screen so I can have a look at it, please. And then we just sort of went through. I said, okay, now I understand what you're talking about. I can remember that. That's imprinted in my brain, but all the words you're throwing at me don't really mean things. And so I'm not a business continuity professional, right? Don't tell anyone, right? But I'm not. And I've come from a technology and operations background in finance, and I don't. So when I go into a lot of these meetings, like you were in these meetings about the journey from BCM to resilience, I was probably only really a few steps ahead of you in going on that journey, because I don't have any preconceptions about it. Well, that's not true. I have negative preconceptions about BCM because of my previous jobs and stuff like that. But for me, it was trying to go on the journey, and I wanted to see pictures. I wanted to see a journey that I could relate to. And the same with cyber. When I first started working with the cyber team at the bank, and interestingly, back in the past, I was a business information security officer for another bank years ago. But it was a very different threat landscape, sort of 15 years ago, to the landscape that we have now. But again, all these crazy acronyms and concepts and stuff like that. And I sat down with one of our senior cyber guys. I said, just dumb it down for me. If you got any puppets or like crayons, just make it understandable. And it worked. And now now I can sit in meetings. I've got the foundational knowledge to be able to understand a lot more as well.
So I think this is key, the point you're bringing up, and I want to dig into this a little bit more, because I think that when many go into an environment like the corporate environment, or perhaps so I've done some work with academics and scientists, and what is really important is for you to be able to advance, you need to be able to speak a particular language. You need to be able to speak a particular dialogue. It's a form of shorthand. It's also a way of understanding that someone belongs in a particular environment. And so what can happen is that dialogue and that communication, that shorthand, that needs to happen sometimes because it makes life easier when you're working. You can make the mistake of believing that same language is what's spoken by others throughout the business. So then if you understand all of this, it's like, can you imagine not understanding English? It's actually something that's really difficult to even comprehend. So the moment you automatically go to think of writing something or communicating something, what happens is you default straight into your first language. And for many, that ends up being inherently technical. So when you get those inherently technical, seeing the world in a particular way, then now having to become communication experts, trying to change culture, trying to change behavior, things very quickly can start to fall down and break apart.
It's a point I always say, actually, when I talk to people about this, the communication element of it. There's certain people in security who are doing awareness and different types of awareness who should never be allowed to speak to people. Never, ever be allowed to speak to people. Shouldn't, because they can't communicate. They can, but they communicate in almost Morse code to these folk.
Yeah.
And that really is the key element. And Simeon, you hit the nail right on the head. Whether you're telling a story or telling a joke or whatever, you're bringing people into your world and you're getting them involved in you, and they are giving you permission at that time to get them interested and entertain them. And woe betide you if you get that with awareness and you ruin and you waste that time that they've given you, because their attention will go somewhere else straight away. So it has to be communicated correctly, but it has to be communicated by people who know how to speak to people from various different backgrounds, and that those people then tell other people, and then they then come to you and they're part of, I hate the word, your audience, so to speak.
The thing that really resonates with me there, that I will steal, is the Morse code, right? Because I think the mistake that we can often make is that unless let's include ourselves in this, because we are now, we can't help but become more technical with our knowledge and understanding. We can make the mistake that we are trying to teach everybody Morse code. Yeah. And we can effectively forget that actually, no, what we're trying to do is we're trying to communicate a message. And the Morse code is merely a method of getting that message across to a certain type of audience. But our audience has shifted. Internally, to those who are experts sitting on the other end on the receiver, in your SOC centers or those in other technical audiences, great, that Morse code works. But the reality is we are just trying to communicate a message. And it may be that we focus so much on the actual Morse code itself that it can be really easy for us to miss the point.
Yeah, I agree. It's almost as, and this, you are right, there's time for Morse code, right? And having a technical background behind me, I can talk Morse code if I need to. I can explain networking and that to folk if I need to. So it is a joyous surprise for them when they see this Scouse idiot turn up. And then I can talk to them about TCP/IP and not think it's just a throat lozenge, so.
Oh, I love it. I mean, I think
I just have this vision. Sorry, to playing the stereotype, right? If you're going in to see all these clients and everyone checking their wallets and going to run out and check their cars,
it's the first joke I do to make sure everybody gets it out the system, right? So I'll normally go in, hey, you notice the accent? Don't worry, I can see you mentally patting yourselves down and stuff like that. Or I'll tell them my best Scouser joke. You know why a Scouser's like Batman? Because they can't go out without robbing. So it gets it out of there and it gets it out of their system because they're thinking about it.
Yeah. So do you know something? I want to ask a pointed question here, Ian. And sorry, Mike. Because you talk about you delivering as a Scouser, right? What do you think about the messenger? Like how significant point do you think like the messenger is? And is that something that you utilize in a very strategic, I don't know, that I think because there's storytelling, the storyteller ends up being often quite key and quite a significant element. So, some stories you imagine it's the grandfather voice, right? And why? Because it reassures you and it settles you down into a particular, once upon a time. But then that same story, if you were needing to storytell to a group of young girls on why to or how to stay safe online as you were going inside chat rooms, etc., that same individual and that same voice would no longer apply. But that it breaks. What role do you think the storyteller has, particularly because you are you're a personality in the space that I find is massively effective at being able to penetrate and get through?
I think it's, and I've done a lot of thinking about this recently, and for me it really is about it's about inhabiting a character, I think, but also not a character too far detached from me as the real person, because I'd like to think when people met me and had a pint with me or a cup of coffee, whatever their poison is, that they would go, oh, actually, yeah, you are a bit like that. So I don't want it to be a surprise where people meet me and I turn up in a cardigan and a flat cap and don't say anything and I'm a little bit shy and retiring, But it's also true that the amplification's turned up a little bit. I get to be a professional Scouser on the video a little bit, I get to be a bit Stan Bowman, a bit Jimmy Tarbuck, a bit of those guys, but it's not so far detached. I'm a rubbish karaoke singer. You've seen that on the videos. Apart from crooning, by the way, if we ever get to crooning, then you'll see the real skill come out. But
I look forward to that video.
Absolutely, a bit of Mac the Knife, a bit of That's Life. We'll be fine then. Don't worry about it. But I want people to after they've spent an hour with me, think I'm never getting that hour back. But to think that actually he is like that. There's nothing I don't want anything false to come across in it. So it's important that if I'm telling that story or telling that thing, it's done with my voice. So it is. I'm not then really amending that voice too much. If it's a group of teenagers or if it's old age pensioners, I want to bridge it with them knowing that it's me and my voice, and they know what they're going to get prior to coming into that conversation.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I love that.
That's great. What about, I mean, I know, Sim, you and I have talked a bit about like lockdown projects. So, lockdown and the way of working has changed in the last year, right? Most of us are stuck at home, and there's no sign of us getting back in the office really for months still, although things are looking up with the vaccine, as long as the South African version of it doesn't take over. But in any case, we've got a changing working patterns that's almost certainly going to stay for some time. Whereas before we've been running big exercises and training sessions, we got people in offices and we can do things with them physically that we couldn't do. Appropriately physically, that we couldn't necessarily if we were at home. But what challenges do you think we have in helping people to understand some of these concepts, and what have you been working on, Sim, that might be able to help?
So I think that so a lot has changed, and we've had to change a lot, right? Because I mean, the key thing for us is that getting across the message, making a subject matter, is the main thing. The tool that we use, whether it be video, animation, virtual reality, or now interactive online modules, as it were, all of those things are just tools in order to be able to grab someone's attention, reorientate them on the subject, and then to make that subject matter. I think now what we do is we find ourselves in a situation where we are competing. I mean, we were always competing for attention. It's just that where people are is different, and we have less control. So I think that when we've spent gone into a number of corporate offices, and if you can visualize, whether it be the stereotypical cubicle or those who are somewhat more open plan, you can go in those environments, and as you go through the lobby area and you see the big keywords that might be part of the mission statements and the core values, and you get into the lift and you go up in the lift, all of a sudden it's like you are changing from one state, one individual, to another. And I think as you go through that process, you become more attuned and acclimatized to the personality of the organization that you are working for. It's the whole purpose of the environment. And what that can mean is that when that organization says, now it's time to do this, and it's dry, bland, click next, corporate training that's really flat, it's fine because you are totally inside that environment. But now we're at home, right? And around us, everything's moving, it's alive. We've got kids running about, right? Working in the other corner. We've got the distractions. We've got more than one phone call. All of a sudden, it's much more difficult to capture people's attention. Inform them that what they're about to look at or what they're looking at really matters, and then keep them long enough in order to be able to leverage that change, and to make that subject matter now is really key. So I mean, the thing we're really focusing on is how we can leverage the same principles that we always do, which is the principles of story. The interactivity is massive. It's really key. Now, I'd be careful here, because click next training modules is a form of interactivity, but for me that doesn't count, right? Just to be clear, I think that what we try to do what we're doing is we're utilizing this interactivity to enable people to make decisions, to be able to control a story, or if you're in a particular situation, to be able to directly make a decision that has impact and consequences. And I think that becomes really useful. I think we've got a couple of things, right? One is, what Ian's fantastic at, and we 100% buy into, is that if you get someone's attention and you've managed to do that, you better have earned that, right? And it better be worth watching and continuing to do. And then when people are working from home now, that becomes even more important. But then also what we want to be able to do is we want to be able to further leverage that. And so that's, I guess what we're really focusing on. A long answer to a very short question. Apologies.
Wow. No, but thank you. And Ian, you've your videos have come to really seemed to have been a lockdown project as well. And
yeah. Without lockdown, I doubt CyberOff would have occurred, to be quite honest, because it came initially from raising a brand profile. Again, I hate saying that, but it came from that. But then it came from also doing some work with the COVID volunteers in the early part of lockdown and helping them with their threat intel to NHS trusts and that around the UK. And I found we were sending out the same newsletter week after week. It just, the date was changed, but the same attacks were there. And I was thinking, why is this? Why do, and then it just kind of grew from there. It grew from there. And Simeon's absolutely correct that I think there's a responsibility on us now more to do the entertaining for people who are at home that we're telling these stories to, that we're giving them this information. We have to entertain. We have to use their time wisely, or they'll just go off on something else. And also as well, it's a break from the norm for them, because that click, next is terrible behavior. There's plenty of studies about rats doing that type of stuff, and you can get them to train them to do anything, So I think what I want to do, and the stuff that Simeon and those guys are doing with virtual reality, which is awesome, to be quite honest, is bringing a different view of how you can look and immerse yourselves in a situation, and then put yourselves in that kind of place without fear of failing, without fear of getting it wrong, without fear of reprisals. And I think that's what is also coming out of this, is that, if you keep telling somebody they're bad at something all the time, so I don't want people to think that this is all about just telling people they're great and they can never fail. Life is not like that. You will fail at stuff, but that's how we, that's how we get better. There's certain times when you have to be a bit realistic. If you've got a kid and you're taking them to the X Factor year on year on year and telling them that they're going to win, but they've got a voice like a goose farting in the fog, you are just doing that kid a disservice by leading them on that way, But actually, if you're thinking about the reality and the responsibility that we have at the moment in lockdown to get people that little bit more savvy, that little bit more aware, using different techniques, breaking out of the norm, being a bit adventurous. I have it leveled at me all the time, not safe for work. It causes offense. Brilliant. It's an instant sign in, sign out for me. I know that you're in my audience or not in my audience if you find me saying bumhole on a video is a little bit too risque for you, So you're backing away from the microphone. That was brilliant. I hope people see that on the record, and I hope it just slowly backing away from the microphone. That was awesome. That was comedic timing of immense proportions. But really, it does come down to, and I also think as well, it comes down to not one size fits all. So have multiple providers, get different opinions, get different views on how you learn and how you take this stuff in. See what resonates with you folks. Try A and B testing and all that stuff. Try running one campaign alongside the other. Try a little bit of a after the watershed moment for folk who want that little bit more risque stuff, and then the safer work stuff where people are comfortable in that. It's a time that we've got now where we can really experiment and really try lots of different pieces, and hopefully with the goal of helping our staff and how our people remain safer online.
I want to jump in here as well. So I think one of the other reasons why, the content that you're making and the things that we've been up to is really important, is because actually we're living in a time now where so much of the messaging is negative, right? And I'm really conscious. We've just made an interactive online module because we can't do the VR at the moment, that thousands of people are going through, and it's about working from home and the risks associated with working from home. Right now, we need to get those things across. But we've also got a lot of other things that we're really worrying about. And all of a sudden, unfortunately, for the message that we have to deliver and also how we need to protect people, we're compounding this, be careful of this, be careful of that, watch out for this, watch out for COVID, don't touch this, don't touch that, don't click on this, don't do that. And we got a lot to contend with on a mental health level, right? And all of us have been, well, I can talk for myself, have struggled to some degree over the course of this, this lockdown. And the messaging that we've got is absolutely critical to personal safety, family safety, organization safety, and infrastructure, and country level and beyond. But isn't it great if we can get these messages across and laugh, right? And enjoy and get those messages. This is a service, right, that is massively important on a human level, and the way that Ian's delivering it and making people smile whilst they're getting these messages is why it's why it's getting so much traction right now, right? It's because it's what people need. People need to smile at this particular time. And I think as we've gone about creating our content as well, we've been very careful in the approach that no, don't be afraid of using humor. I'm in our digital experiences, right, Ian, as well. So we try and make sure that we balance these things out so that we can get these messages across. But what we shouldn't be doing right now is just putting out the same corporate rhetoric on these messaging, because now is not the time for that.
But it's interesting because, if you think about what happened in the first half of 2020 when we got into the first lockdown, there's a lot of things that in previous years were too difficult or too risky for corporations to do. So widespread rollout of collaboration tools that information security professionals were concerned that it would increase the risk of data leakage and And even worse, they're going to be doing it from home, and we haven't got physical controls in place, and we don't know who's got their laptop, and maybe there's going to be somebody sitting over their shoulder looking at everything they do and videoing it. And so we didn't do it. But the first half of last year, it's like go, 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 go. And everyone suddenly has got a laptop. Everyone's working from home. Everyone's got, Teams and stuff. I've got Teams on my phone here, and it's been a great enabler. So now is the time to say, well, that worked okay. And actually everything's okay. And we have more controls in place. We've had to put something to check and etc. But why don't we take a risk in some of the other elements as well? And the PC police that maybe will brand all of Ian's stuff not safe for work may actually let a few of them through, and or a slightly edited version of it.
Yeah, which is exactly why I've done some PG versions, right? Just to get around that.
They're very short. They're only about like 30 seconds long because you've had to remove so much of it.
I just spend all my time barking at the moon, to be quite honest.
But no, sorry, I interrupt you. But yeah, I mean that's important because I just get so frustrated with the way that we do things, and what you've done, Ian, is you bring everything to life. You make it real, you make it funny, but you make it real, right? And people will remember it. And the message, I've been sending that stuff to my family and friends. Yeah, like you said, you're the security guy. I'm the IT guy for the family as well. So anything wrong with technology comes to me, and I normally fix it with a swift reboot. But it's one of those things that it does help, and it makes people understand the concepts, because there's no point in you saying, watch out for this APT group, whatever, or Cozy Bear this. Nobody cares, nobody knows. But and if you're saying things like, well, it could be you that they are after to get your information, they're like, nobody cares about me. But if you basically put it to, basically, here's a really simple thing you can do so you don't get scammed like a moron.
Yeah, but that's interesting, right? When people use that language, when they use APT, or they give it a destination like Russia or China, then they build a James Bond image around it where it's big business. It will never happen to me. And we all have terrible cognitive biases, right? That we don't really think about too much, because it hurts your head when you start to think about it. But actually, as soon as you start framing it as a otherworldly thing where it's organized groups who are after this, that, and the other, people kind of switch off and think it's not going to be me. When actually, if we sat down and went through all the attacks of last year, the sophistication on 99% of them was zero, right? It was just, it's the same tired techniques, it's the same approaches, it's the same type of issues coming up time and time again, which is why I contend that giving the same message, doing it in different ways, in different scenarios, with different videos or different learning methods, is the way to do it.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that I think that's one of the reasons we enjoy using stories so much, is that actually that description you gave there, Ian, of the organized business, right? Of course, there is a reality to that, because it can be organized businesses that are using those simple methods. But when you get to use storytelling, the great thing is actually, in the way that you do with many films, you actually get to set up the antagonist, the organization, the force, the individual, and then you can make the individual the protagonist, and you just use storytelling to join the dots to make that individual care about that same purpose or what's going to happen. So storytelling can be used as that bridge between that abstract concept, and it can bring it much, much closer to home. And I think that's where we've really enjoyed using that interactivity, because we can go, right, you know something, we're going to make a mission control center of the dark web. And we're going to send you on a mission there, and we're going to give you 3 minutes undercover to look at what the individuals and the criminals are doing. And then we can use that interactivity now as you go against the clock to then bring that, it brings it straight to you at home. Also engages, in some cases, we've heard some organizations where the children have gone in and started going and getting involved in the mandatory learning and training. Why? Because we've designed it for ourselves, like yourself, Ian, right? We've designed it for ourselves. And I think that the key thing that we're seeing now is that there was a phrase you used earlier, Mike, and I forgot what it was to do with the attitude towards training. I think the thing is at the moment, you said that it's time for people to consider taking a risk. And I'd love to challenge that, because I would love people to stop thinking of this as taking a risk. Having personality isn't a risk, right? Actually, what we're doing is we're actually just communicating in a normal way, because everyone's now started to live at home. They've started to realize that this isn't about big business, which was just business on another layer, which was disconnected from the normal individual and disconnected from the home. All of a sudden, business in some ways has been brought to its knees in a very humble way, and actually in quite a nice way, because business now forms part of home life. And as a result, businesses are having to understand what matters to the individual and how individual wants to communicate, and starting to understand, how to grab an individual's attention in a way that matters to them. So I think this is a great opportunity for us now to look to the future as an opportunity to bring in personality and to try and do things differently.
Let's not put a suit and tie on everything we do. Let's make it more accessible. Chaps, thank you very much for your time. I've really enjoyed that conversation. I would encourage anyone who watches this, and obviously there's going to be at least one of you, 3 of us, but please do have a look at CyberOff and Ian's stuff on LinkedIn, and also Vivida and Simeon stuff as well. There's some awesome work that both you guys have been doing in this space, and keep doing it. I've had a go myself at creating some interactive training. I'll share that with you guys, and maybe put a bit on the end of this video. My resilience risk destruction 8-bit game. It's awesome.
Pow, pow,
pow, pow, pew, pew,
pew, pew.
Ouch. Yeah, you listen to the sound effects. They're very good. But thank you guys, and we'll hopefully speak to you both soon.
Brilliant. Thanks, chaps. Really enjoyed it.
See you later.
Pew 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 pew.
Bang bang bang.
Ooh,
that's better. Bang bang bang. Bang. Bang bang. Bang. Bang.
Ouch.